my evidence is focused around several different um, data sets and vantage points of proof. Lucky Louie, he demands overwhelming evidence for extraordinary claims. I'm going to oblige him. I'm going to give him extraordinary evidence that he's Mick West. The other editors and admins that have been abusing Wikipedia and aiding and abetting these guys, I've got all their names listed in archive too. And I don't think a person on the internet should be allowed to retain anonymity when they are intentionally causing others harm repeatedly. I'm well on my way to proving that Mick is who I think he is, but I also have several others that are unnamed, anonymous. I already know who they are. There are some professors in there. There are some cutting edge journalists and academics that have been very vocal against disclosure. When you have people that are so rigid minded, and you have to remember a lot of these that do acknowledge being guerrilla skeptics, which is different from guerrilla skeptics in Wikipedia. They wrote a paper on reverse editing. So when they take skeptical inquiry articles, they find any article in Wikipedia that they can shove it into as a reliable source to get their dogma out.
We have with us today Mr. Rob Heatherly, an American hero, a U.S. Marine vet. Rob Heatherly is known for his diverse career, starting with his honorable service as an infantry Marine, a structural and design engineer, as well as working with electronics. His many interests include physics and in ancient history, which led him to explore UFO literature and non-human intelligences. His work is aimed at leading to a better understanding of UAPs and non-human intelligence. Mr. Heatherly has been involved in bringing to light evidence of a UFO cover-up. He claims that there is a well-organized secret cabal of debunker editors organized by a California-based 501c3 nonprofit group named as the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia, who are intentionally rewriting what you see about such topics as UFOs, the paranormal, personalities that are attempting to bring about disclosure, and other topics of the phenomena on Wikipedia. Mr. Heatherly is the co-host of the YouTube channel Military Witnesses to UAP. Check them out. And Mr. Heatherly has appeared on various platforms like The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford, and radio shows such as Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. We are extremely and incredibly excited and honored to have Mr. Heatherly with us today to discuss his research. Welcome, Rob, to Cosmic Convergence. And for all of you tuning in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to check out Mr. Heatherly's YouTube channel.
Don't pay any attention to the disappearing head through Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, for the high quality here. But I had no idea. I had no idea of Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia, and I'll just say it, in my opinion, ham-fisted attempts at silencing knowledge and information on such topics as George covered in the introduction, until I saw your interview with Mr. Matt Ford, and all so much respect for bringing that out to the public, and I really do appreciate you doing so and your continuing investigation. And then further on, I had no idea, mainly because I don't really pay attention to Wikipedia as much. I tend to do my own independent research on the side to come to my determinations, but that she had been doing, Miss Gerbic and Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia had been doing this since 2011, and that's just wow. I mean, and thank goodness for you bringing it to light, because I mean, how much longer would have had gone on without, your investigation on them? And so we owe you, in my opinion, we owe you a great debt of gratitude for your continuing investigation and bringing them to light and the tactics that they use. And we also thank you for being here on the program with us today.
I don't like blowing my own horn, so to speak, but My skill sets that lend to my excelling at engineering estimating. I've got a very high pattern recognition aptitude. It's about 156% above normal. So I notice patterns in everything. It doesn't matter if it's word use, um, anything in my environment. If I notice it, whether it's how someone's dressed or a phrase or a picture or glyph, a language character set, if it's notable in my mind and I see it again, I remember where I saw it prior and I put all these together. I do
Mm,
that with people as well, where I network, because when somebody uh, presents with a certain skill set that and interests and things of that nature, when I know that they would be a good fit with somebody else that shares that in common, no one is an island, and this is one of the most complex topics facing humanity. I help network like-minded people together that I think would synergize to help build the narrative from all perspectives. I welcome skepticism because it's a necessary function to keep us honest, but you have to be honest skeptic to do that, which means
mm,
something I go back to is whenever I'm engaging with somebody, I have to determine if they become unteachable, then the conversation stops. Because if they're not open to new information and they're rigid in their belief structure, there's no point in having a logical discussion with an illogical mind. So that's where I draw the line when that's discerned. We're dealing with guerrilla skeptics through CFI that have very rigid scientism beliefs, and these are the people that would have burned Bruno and Galileo because it was absurd that the Earth wasn't the center of the galaxy. These are the kind of people that have hindered that all along. They're even riding the clutch on alternative ancient history views. They're doing on any medicines because they believe if a medicine was actually useful, that it would be FDA approved. And we all know how much it costs to bring a drug to market and how competitive it is. So it's very cost prohibitive, even when you have something that works. They even go after chiropractic. I've used chiropractors most of my life. They work. So an acupuncture that's been around for 6,000 years, why are those so hard contested? But a common theme, and I'll just start out this with, is that a lot of the things that they that the and then I draw the distinction, Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia is Susan and her project, which I think is it's kind of a low level operation handling low level pages and topics. And then you have an elevated level that Lucky Louie and his crew are in that are affiliated skeptics with the Guerrilla Skeptics. They all are under the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry.
mhm,
Most of them are fellows, and
mhm.
she stated that we didn't even bother to quantify who's Guerrilla Skeptic members, um, that we haven't bothered. Yes, we actually have, but it's not that important right now to what we're doing because they are not having a significant impact of disinformation. It's the group Lucky Louie and Joshua Schroeder, who's a astrophysicist teacher, who's had a long, long history of bad attitude and edit warring and aggressive attacks on other people, and like the cold fusion guys. Um there's a whole document that shows scores and scores of Wikipedia attacks off wiki against I think John Lerner, with cold fusion. He took on the entire industry attacking them, because they had opposing viewpoints of his. He's extremely hostile, just like Robert Palmer, RP 2006. He acknowledges he's part of the Guerrilla Skeptics. The rest don't, but they all exhibit talking points of Committee for Skeptical Inquiry fellows.
Mhm.
And I've identified who some of those editors are already. I just haven't outed them because it's not the right time. Same thing with Lucky Louie. He demands overwhelming evidence for extraordinary claims. I'm going to oblige him. I'm going to give him extraordinary evidence that he's Mick West. And the other editors and admins that have been abusing Wikipedia and aiding and abetting these guys, I've got all their names listed in archive too. And I don't think a person on the internet should be allowed to retain anonymity when they are intentionally causing others harm repeatedly. So
Agreed.
I'm going to, I'm well on my way to proving that Mick is who I think he is, but I also have several others that are unnamed, anonymous. I already know who they are. There are some professors in there. There are some cutting edge journalists and academics that have been very vocal against disclosure. Um,
Hmm.
and I even found a DoD employee on Wikipedia as an anonymous editor, and they
Oh,
think that
wow.
they are getting away with it, but they're not.
Now, in terms of your sources and methods, it's been questioned online in terms of the identity of Lucky Louie. And for those of you watching, we did have an opportunity to interview with Susan Gerbic, and she claims Lucky Louie is not Mick West. And I find it interesting that Mick West on the Twitter sphere, he's trying to get interviews with ufologists in the field with with varying degrees of non-success for his new book that's coming out.
Yeah,
What evidence do you have that Lucky Louie is indeed Mick West? And by the way, Lucky Louie is a prolific Wikipedia editor.
Oh yes, one of the
he
top.
is the most aggressive editor of anything paranormal, anything that involve ufology or UFOs, religion, Annabelle the doll, chemtrails, Morgellons. So he watches 2,500 pages, Lucky Louie does, and you can go and find that list. It is accessible from his user page,
Hmm.
and you can go through and look at all the talk pages that he follows, and it's in lockstep with everything that Mick West has ever expressed an interest in. So that in itself is I ran an AI query once with language samples and topic, and which it's, it can be fallible, of course, because a lot of it draws from Wikipedia. So unfortunately, for now, my evidence is focused around several different um, data sets and vantage points of proof. One of them that I did was going back on looking at, first of all, Lucky Louie edits full time back to his inception, June 19th, 2006, which coincides with his anniversary date, I believe. Um, no, it's his wife's birthday. Sorry, got that backwards. But anyway, Lucky Louie's account was created in 2006 on that Memorial Day, and he edits full time. On the I went through and found the patterns clear back from last year to his 2006, where on the closest Sunday to their anniversary, there are far less edits. The trend is than there is on the corresponding Sundays of any other time comparatively. So I did analysis of that. I now analyze their her birthday, their anniversaries, and days that they've posted that they go skiing or that they take a road trip or 2 weeks
Hmm.
in UK on a vacation or at a seminar that is expressed on social media. I corresponded those dates with the edits of Lucky Louie, and it's almost to nil on those dates. Even the 2 week vacation, there's little short edits along the way. Um, so I've correlated at least 3 dozen events where Lucky Louie and Mick West were both out of pocket at the same time. Take, for instance, last year, there was an edit on June 19th or 18th where a Wikipedia editor requested Lucky Louie to help out with the UFO page. And he goes, I'm going to be away from the computer for a couple of days and I won't be able to help till I get back. And on Metabunk, on June 20th or 19th, he mentions that, sorry, I was AFK, for the last couple of days, was predisposed. What are the odds that Lucky Lee was predisposed and not editing on the same day as Mick West, which happened to have been their anniversary? That was
Hmm.
kind of telling. So there's many corollaries with that on AFK days that I have. There's also, I ran over 70 phrases that Mick West and Lucky Lee have that are atypical words that you would use. Also, because he came out and said that, well, how I was spelling, because repetitive spelling errors, how, he mentioned that too. How would repetitive spelling errors show up because Wikipedia autocorrects? No, they don't. Not on talk pages, especially. So they can misspell whatever they want on talk pages, whereas most of the action happens that that they don't want the public to see. And there are peculiar ways that a programmer will punctuate a sentence that a normal person wouldn't, because it's not proper English. It's not proper syntax and the way you would use your punctuation. But for a programmer, it's normal. Lucky Louie and Mick West both exhibit the same types of programming, shorthand. And also I'll share it on this one. They both argue that the word through should be abbreviated to THRU. So there's many instances of both of them using that along with these different uh, spelling, the punctuation styles that are unique to programmers, but also to UK. They're both English. And when I ran a comparison of a whole bunch of files and stuff through AI, it said that it either was the same person or somebody so very familiar with them that they're pretty much would have to be joined at the hip. It was like a 98% probability, but it couldn't say 100% because it didn't have the smoking gun. And I've got an instance to where he was in an argument on Mick West was on an argument on Twitter about Kevin Knuth and a paper that he had published, a white paper that was peer reviewed that he was trying to advance. And it became a hot argument. It was like June 20th of 2020 or something like that on Twitter. And it was very specific. It was talking about how Knuth, his paper was put into a credulous publishing house that should not be given credit as a reliable source because it accepts credulous papers like Kevin Knuth, who's an actual physicist that knows what the hell he's doing. But because they published his paper, it made it a not credible source. And Mick West was arguing that in Twitter, but within 24 to 36 hours, Lucky Louie was having the exact same argument on Wikipedia with other editors, and it was arguing about the reliable source. It was arguing about the specific paper, Kevin Knuth, obviously, and one or two of the reporters that was trying to push it as well. So there was multiple data points of that argument that were in lockstep with Mick West on Twitter within the same 48-hour time span. What are the odds of that?
Why deny it though? Why does Mick West and Susan Gerbic deny these accusations that Lucky Louie and Mick West are one and the same? What do they stand to benefit from this flat out denial that they're not one and the same people?
Well, I've got an article I started. I haven't finished it. It argued Mick West was because he has and when he left programming and sold out in around 2000. He started editing Wikipedia in 2004 as an IP, and then he switched over to Mick West and then Herd of Swine. I have several IP addresses that he accidentally logged in. He forgot to log in and edited from his IP, and Wikipedia attributed it to being him. So I've got those, and I've got the same with Lucky Louie and Herd of Swine. So I've got several IP addresses attributed to him, which he's smart. He's very smart. I'll give him that. They can alter their IPs and bounce it around so it's dynamic, not static. But when there are some that he has to use Wikipedia because they can't spoof and hide their IP from Wikipedia and expect them to accept that. So they have to show some IP range at least that would fall within to know who's who as an editor that's repeating. So when he came in, he opened his account as Mick West in 2005. In 2006, on April 10th, he created Herd of Swine account, and on June 19th, Lucky Louie was created. Around that same time frame, he entered into Morgellons that he had opened a website on to argue that was all that there was no actual Morgellons illness. There was a bunch of people imagining, psychogenic illness that may have had some other manifestation medically, but they were misattributing it to Morgellons that doesn't exist. Well, there's two more anonymous name editors on the Morgellon page where there was another editor arguing that was Mick West. As those other two IPs that were giving Mick West an assist, because on that Morgellons page, what was contemporary with his Morgellons Watch website, the arguments being made by these two anonymous IP addresses would back Mick up and check, because we all know, that majority rules on a page. You have to have the majority to be able to control it, and you have to have admin, because once somebody comes in and tries to argue with them, or edit whatever that they don't approve, they get page protected, and then they have control of it operationally. So it doesn't, put your suggested edits in the talk section, and we'll take it under advisement. Bullshit. But anyway, these two editors would come in within minutes to back Mick West up and on it, and their edits would mirror what was on the Morgellons website. And one of the things that really stood out with their best argument was that the CDC came out with a statement on Morgellons and Lyme disease at the same time, and the comment infused the two that was articulated in any specific phrase of statement on those. It was misquoted on the Morgellons website, and it was also verbatim misquoted on the Morgellons Wikipedia page by those same editors. So they had altered the CDC statement, and I've got all this archived. I've got receipts for this. I've got the links. I can provide all of it. So everything I can prove, I can back up. So
Mick West, the hammer has been dropped. Mr. Heatherly has the receipts. He's done the research in terms of finding out the correlations and connections between this alter ego of Lucky Louie and.
Well, now hold on. Now hold on. If I might interject here,
it's not settled.
This could be his butler. This could be his chauffeur.
Or dog.
This could be his best friend. This
it's not
could
his
be
wife.
Someone that, it's not his wife.
She does tarot readings though.
That's interesting.
Oh,
that's very interesting. Maybe we should.
Interesting.
That is interesting. But sometimes
does she
opposites
really?
attract.
My goodness.
Hold on.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Sometimes opposites attract. And so I won't bring the wife in. I won't do that.
She's trying to be a good atheist wife and support him, but she just had to go out and put a tarot reading on her blog, doing that for a while.
Okay. So my question is this, because when we were interviewing Ms. Gerbic, and this conversation, by the way, for people that are watching, it's not all going to be about Ms. Gerbic, okay? Because she's very, but I wanted to point this out from our last episode, okay, is that our interview with her was that she was very adamant about pointing out that she was the head of the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia, not Mick West. That essentially, right. Mr. Heatherly, you were off your rocker for suggesting that Mick West was the one that was really in charge in the background. But when I'm listening to what you're saying, even some of the basic information that you've just put out is that he's been doing this since 2004, 2006, which is way before the institution, technically, of the 5013C, Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia. Meaning that, and since he won't go, maybe I'm drawing conclusions that there's no sense in, so bear with me here. But I'm starting to think, well, because he's already was his Mick West and then the swine thing, and then now he's Lucky Louie, that he needed to put a face out for these editors and for himself, and rather than put his own face out and hide it in that anonymity, Susan Gerbic was chosen to be the face of the Wikipedia, the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia, which of course are, part of an umbrella group of the, the skeptical for inquiry.
Committee for Inquiry.
Yeah, but now it's Community for Inquiry. It used to be skeptical, but they dropped that because
and the subsidiary is Community for Skeptical Inquiry that has the CSI Fellows and the Skeptical Inquirer online magazine.
Correct.
That they are fellows of and write for. And I think the average is $1,500 an article that they get paid. I know, like felon Brian Dunning, he gets paid full time to work for Skeptical Inquiry and make propaganda films like he has. He even states it in his own movie.
But that's not profit, right?
No.
Oh, really?
Huh. Well, not.
But that's quite an incentive. My goodness, $1,500.
Right. Well, I'm just saying because they always want to seem that they're talking about non-for-profit. And I'm looking at this Center for Inquiry, and they raised like $5 million plus last year. And so I'm just wondering, like, where why are they raising so much? And B, where is that money going to? Just little seminars
You
where they can
can
laugh
you can
about this
read
stuff?
it in
Yep.
their breakdown where
Yep.
it goes to bloggers, it
Yep.
goes to authors, it goes to Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. These
Hmm.
people are paid to do what they're doing. Lucky
Hmm.
Louie is full time. He's been working full time on Wikipedia since 2004. I found the exact edits where he's met people like in 2005 and 6, Joshua Schroeder, where he's met Susan Gerbic, and all these other players and major contributors now among this core group. I've found where all of them early on congealed together as a group of ardent skeptics that were editing in the spirit of Jimmy Wales, who wanted no quackery and pseudoscience and all that on his platform, which I can respect that, but they don't allow they are the ones to discern. And you when you have people that are so rigid minded, and you have to remember a lot of these that do acknowledge being guerrilla skeptics, which is different from guerrilla skeptics of Wikipedia. The They wrote a paper on reverse editing. So when they take skeptical inquiry articles, they find any article in Wikipedia that they can shove it into as a reliable source to get their dogma out. So um,
And
you've
and
got
and the higher up in the Escalon for Center of Inquiry, the elite membership is like I say, like I pointed out with Seth Shostak from
hmm
SETI. Okay, when they go ahead and they edit an article about David Grusch, they'll throw in Seth Shostak to
yeah,
go ahead and say what, negative things against Grush. And then, of course, that's just them patting the back,
yeah,
as I
and then
mentioned to
they write.
Susan. Hmm.
They say that they have to go by what is the mainstream consensus. Um,
Hmm.
so what on a talking point narrative like Van syndrome, if there's a and they determine what are reliable sources too. So when they have enough reliable sources that say it's all mass psychogenic illness, because Robert Bartholomew has wrote a book on it, he's wrote over 2 dozen articles on it that it's all mass psychogenic illness, and even up to this year he's written articles. So they when they don't have mainstream consensus on any given topic, then they fire up their CSI fellows to write articles on it until they do have enough articles from reputable sources
That's a
to shove in there.
one-sided echo chamber,
But
Mr. Heatherly.
Yes.
like I said to Susan, I asked, who are these peers? I gave her an opportunity. Who are these peers that are the secondary sources, which you're, which you went right
Neil
out
deGrasse
just right now.
Tyson, Bill Nye.
Right,
There's
right.
there's one that was pinch hitting for Lucky Louie since he started getting feeling heat in February. That's came in her mancha or something like that. Basically, it's a taxonomy of a dinosaur. But I know who that person is. That was stupid. Uh, I know who most of them are actually. It's just not time and relevant
No,
yet
that's
to
fine.
bring that out. But these are some professors and some senior journalists that are trying to keep hidden that are going to be very embarrassed. You asked me why he would go anonymous so early on, and I'll tell you, when he started Magellan's Watch and chemtrails, he saw how aggressive people can be. And when he was arguing, this is what drew me in the first place. He was bragging in a blog about debating a priest and trying to convince him that God didn't exist. How cruel is it to try and strip somebody of their faith for no reason other than to prove you're right? Because to ease your conscience and your fears, you impose your belief structure on somebody else. And the more people that can buy into your narrative, the more you feel like you're correct, like metabunk. So he creates an echo chamber to make him feel better. But that was cruel, trying to strip a priest of their faith and convince them that it was atheism. So I went looking for that, and I found the exact context of it, and the entire conversation they had, start to finish, was extensive. And the guy toward the end was telling Mick to stop emailing him. And this was under Mick West's name on Wikipedia, by the way. So it's not conjecture. It's Lucky Louie. The guy had to even tell him stop emailing me because he was spamming him with atheist dogma and information, trying to overwhelm him with it. And the guy finally had to block him and go on because he was so militant. And that's where you
Wow.
get the guerrilla skeptic ethos, is that they realize that they are extremely small percentage, even among skeptics. Their subset of skepticism is so dogmatic and narrowly scoped that they have inadvertently created a religion of no religion. So as they state, they're using Wikipedia as the number one global tool to spread their message, not the truth, not facts. It's facts as they interpret them, and they decide what are reliable sources. They decide which science is accepted, which medical is correct, and which is not. Even when you have just as many, if not more, opposing viewpoints on most of science is not settled. And when you have credible theories and evidence, like with Havana syndrome, that there are some instances of a weapon being utilized, you have these people arguing on Wikipedia and such, making statements of fact that these things can't exist, that they are experts in what are classified documents, what all the governments of the world hold as classified technologies. Robert Palmer argues because he was a satellite engineer, the ergo he knows everything about physics and engineering. So if he doesn't believe that it exists, then it doesn't, because he thinks he's the final authority. He's not. Shostak, whatever his name is, he's never had access to the classified UFO programs. When Nelson came out and did that study for NASA to see if there's UAPs and if it's worth pursuing, they didn't have access to classified data. They used the public information to draw from. Of course, they didn't find anything. Even if they did, they wouldn't tell us, because they are pushing an agenda. And
Yes.
our government is not a monolith. They are not of one accord. They're not in lockstep on this topic. That is why it's so contentious and dangerous, frankly, when you have people like David Grusch, the most senior intelligence officer to date, that came forward in the proper due process of law to provide testimony to the DOD IG doing his job. I mean, this guy, imagine this, he's 34 years old. He's not just an NGO analyst. This guy was over NGO and NGA. He was calling the shots there in a senior leadership role, and multiple others. He was delivering the daily intelligence briefing to the former president daily. He was cleared to over 2,000 SAP programs at the height of his involvement with the UAP task force. So Kirkpatrick stating that he knows everything David was cleared for is bullshit, because as the Wilson documents showed, if you don't have the proper clearance and need to know, you by law cannot be read in unless somebody invites you and gives you the proper clearance, which is so with the Wilson documents. The Admiral Wilson had the need to know and the clearance just like David did, but was denied access. So David turned that in, doing his duty to the DODIG, believing in our system still, that they would do the right thing. And what happened next was it got leaked, and then death threats ensued from private aerospace companies towards several people. And there's speculation that a certain scientist that committed suicide the spring before last wasn't actually suicide, Amy Eskridge. I don't know that she's the one that was turned in, but to think that under certain circumstances, it is legal for under the guise of national security, to kill a U.S. citizen, even if they aren't aware that they're having an adverse impact. If they can justify it, they can take somebody out. That, to me, was alarming when I found that out. And a crash retrieval program like David talked about in his public interviews mentions that that under certain circumstances, the White House could have a program like this, a crash retrieval program, that would only have to answer to one person, even in the White House, that would have awareness and may or may not have to inform Congress at all under certain circumstances. And they do have power to murder people if it's against, if it's in the name of national security. So there could be a unacknowledged crash retrieval program that some entity still in the White House might know of it, or maybe one member or something of the Gang of Eight. I don't know this. I'm just speculating. But there could be a bigoted few that do know the program exists, do condone it, are allocating the funds towards them on the sly without having to declare they even exist. To see, in the emails that came out in the FOIA, they were, Kirkpatrick's writing that he asked for were the program names, and then he comes back, well, I want the name of those alleged programs. if they're not read into a program, it's against the law and a felony for David to tell anybody that a program exists, even the name of it is against the law to tell if they don't have the clearance for it. So in the email in that FOIA release, David Grusch stated that, and he even cited the exact verbiage, the statutes in the law that would be required for Arrow to have access to any UAP related government special access program or otherwise program, that they had the authority for that. But what David expressed that most people are not picking up of, unfortunately, like what's this last guy, Dean, that came in and wrote an article the other day,
Yeah.
Condemning David for not cooperating and lying about coming in to talk to him. David didn't lie. Up to December 10th, there had been no official communication between him and Kirkpatrick, which Kirkpatrick in that FOIA release also wrote somewhere that he was asking for contact information of an email or phone number, and that he would have to contact David through official communications, networks, whether, the email system approved by the government or a call, which are all archived. So that never took place prior to the email that David sent, on behalf of Gillibrand in December 2010. That was the first official channel communication. That was after Kirkpatrick said that they had tried to contact David Grusch multiple times by phone and email, and he refused to come in. No, they had not ever contacted him through official channels to that date, because Kirkpatrick has a huge ego and he's not going to beg somebody to come in. That's why he, probably went around to David's friends and colleagues and, hey, can you encourage him to come in and talk to me? But he's not going to get it documented he did. And
and it was that Title 50 kind of clearance that supposedly Kirkpatrick didn't have, that didn't allow David Grusch.
Yeah, it stated exactly what clearance they had that was from the DOD, but there wasn't a corresponding, I think you mentioned DOE clearance, because you got to have the IC clearance, you got to have the DOD clearance, and you got to have DOE clearance and other ones, that programs and that we don't even know exist officially. So if he couldn't, Kirkpatrick stating that he knew everything David Grusch was cleared for, that was just moronic, because if you're not read into a program you don't know exists. It's like the guy around 1908 that worked in a patent office. He said that everything that could be invented has been. Very short-sighted, I would dare say.
Right.
So Kirkpatrick's ego is just huge. And no, he wasn't read in because he didn't have the need to know of everything David Grusch was cleared for, and by whom. Because at one point, it appears when he was tasked with finding the crash retrieval program, it wasn't hearsay. And in Cooler Talk and on Twitter, there was something posted by Rob Sheridan last 24 hours that stated that where Eric Davis made comments that David Grusch had access to talk directly with the legacy program members. It wasn't just hearsay, and he had the power to bring them in and sit them down in a skiff and interrogate them, or question them, as the case may be. But when you're in the military, you have orders. You have to come in and talk.
No, that's a whole bunch of great information that you shared with us, Rob. No. Do not apologize for that by any means, because what my statement was going to be is that even in the beginning, when you started talking about Grusch and his clearances and stuff, you definitely won't find that on Wikipedia. And and so if someone, especially that's younger, that wants to go and research something on Wikipedia, they're not going to find that if you have the Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia and their ilk going around and editing these things. Because I tried to ask Miss Gerbic about David Grusch going in front of Congress and talking. That's a serious thing, going in front of Congress and giving that testimony.
Under
not
oath.
to mention, yes, the testimony under oath.
He gave sworn testimony to two
That's
IGs,
right.
to at least two intelligence committees in Congress. He gave one time alone was 11 hours of classified testimony, and I think he was cleared recently to come out and say that he has seen firsthand evidence. Finally, he was cleared to say that. So,
and Mr. Heatherly, Gerbic
Bro.
had the audacity to suggest that the reason why David Grusch came out in the first place was for money and fame.
And that's interesting, because I tried to press her on that a couple times. I asked her, so what you're saying is that he's just going up in front of Congress and he just wants money and fame. There's no other reason why. That, the background conspiracy by some of these extreme skeptics is that the UFO community, especially the spokespeople, which now Grusch is a part of, are actually
Mhm.
trying to manipulate the government into this false flag kind of narrative and this woo thinking
Mhm.
to try to have an influence on the government and the people as a whole. And they just, of course, that's the conspiracy. So the group that's against things that they consider conspiracy have their own conspiracy, which is
Mhm.
just it's just kind of ironic. She had stated, and again, I don't mean to have this all about her, but she had stated in that interview on several occasions that she was the person that did the most editing on anything that was UAP, UFO related on Wikipedia, and that it was really interesting to her. But yet, in an email that she had sent to George pre interview, and in the early part of it, she was saying that her big thing was psychics.
Yeah.
So, what I'm understanding though is that really you have Lucky Louie is doing most of the editing through all of these kind of things. And
Mhm.
so it's just, again, it's like trying to obfuscate the truth for some reason as to be like I'm the one that's in charge. It's just like
Her ego.
it's the ego, and you can kind of see right through it. And then you had mentioned that in the interview you found her to be condescending towards us. And again,
Mhm.
I kind of expected that. We kind of went in expecting that, and she was gracious to a point when being on there. But I just found that with the questions that we were asking, it was kind of unsettling after a while. But
I
that's just interesting about the Grush thing. It's just like you're this expert. It really fascinates you about the UAP. It's like she said about Ross Coulthart. She said that Ross Coulthart hadn't been a target
uh-huh.
until the news started going out about him. And I'm thinking, well, if you're really interested in this kind of stuff for a long period of time, you would have known who Russ Coulthart was
She
and how
did.
before you started editing the paper. And it's just kind of interesting to me, like a little bit of doublespeak, a little bit of, nonsensical direction getting
Well,
thrown our way.
she had performed, she brags about this. It's on her wiki page. She's got some CFI articles about it where they ran sting operations where they came up with false identities on social media and they set up psychics that were going to have they get a call, hey, the psychic's going to be in town doing something such and such. So they go and create fake accounts on Facebook and whatever and try to get that psychic to read them. And if they pulled up the false information, then they expose them as charlatans, which is rightly so. If it's entertainment, fine, that's wonderful. But if you're preying on people that have had, a loss and they're looking for
Sure.
hope, um, you don't want to lie to them. Um,
Great.
with religion, you can't disprove God, and people need
Right.
to believe in something. Why strip that from somebody? If they're harming people, and on a say on a litmus test of reasonable people that don't have a strong opinion on it, to make that determination that it's reasonable, then yeah, if there's concerns that needs to be investigated, but it needs to be respectful. They go in and like she was bragging about in that montage that Matt Ford so greatly put together, that they were proud to edit in the name felon to discredit them because they know the first two lines, the first two
Mm-hmm.
sentences in a Wikipedia article are the most crucial because that's what most people read and then don't proceed. So if they control the first two lines, that is everything to them. So discrediting somebody by calling him a felon in the first two lines, she was bragging, she was so proud of her editors for that. And they were trying to do the same thing to Bob Lazar, which love him, hate him, believe him or not, I don't care. But he's still a human being. And she picked up that dehumanizing thing from me because that's what they do is dehumanize people like they did Lazar and that poor woman. Yeah, she may have been drawing information from Facebook and stuff and doing parlor tricks on telling people things that they wanted to hear. Fine, but it's not that harmful. But she doesn't realize how damaging she is to those people's livelihoods, their families, the impacts that they have. Brian Dunning has a felony where he, about 22 million worth skimmed out of eBay on fees that he misappropriated. Is that at the top of its page? Because most people know Brian Dunning for two things: UFOs and eBay fraud. Those should be in the first two sentences. Is it? No, it's pushed way down in it, and it makes it look like it was just an accounting error on his part, so he shouldn't have been
Right.
charged. No lack of integrity there.
No.
Bullshit. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of disgusting what they do, and with demeaning people. They're trying. And one of the edits that Lucky Louie did, he was questioning somebody on the talk page for Bob Lazar, saying, "Well, if we can find more mainstream articles that mention his arrest, then we can put felon up in the top. So if you can find me more articles that are reliable sources, we'll shove them in there."
Okay, well, fair is fair. So if anybody has when this guy was, maybe 6 or 7, and he went to a convenience store and he stole a candy bar off the shelf and he put it in his pocket, please come forward and we'll use
Mhm.
you as a reliable secondary source, and then we'll go ahead and we'll post that online. Well, that's what George, it's true though, but that's what Guerrilla Skeptics of Wikipedia do. That's what they do. Is
That's so
they'll
dirty.
go out, you know.
These are why we need to make the distinction, guys. These are guerrilla skeptics. That is a type of asymmetrical tactic because they know that they are the vast majority. They feel like they're up against unsurmountable odds. So the ends justify the means to them.
Yep.
They can do anything that's dishonest or and unethical because they feel like that once they determine these people are causing harm to others and charlatans and quacks and all that crap, then they feel justified to attack and discredit and demean. That's what got me onto this in the first place was they were attacking innocent, honest people that had a strong opinion that actually had the knowledge to be in a position to speak with authority where they're on their station. And these guerrilla skeptics use these tactics anything that they can because the court of public opinion by and large do not fact check. The majority of people will just pop in like on Wikipedia, see, read a brief outline and then make a quick determination because a moment is 5 to 7 seconds. And when you spend a lot of time on the internet, you don't take minutes to read anything. When you want to just get a quick idea on something, you just pop in, snag it, and go. And that's why they utilize the first two lines. I started seeing when David Grusch went public certain phraseologies on Twitter of new users that were talking about David Grusch in a certain way negatively using the same talking points and keywords that I noticed. So I went looking for the source of that, and it was Wikipedia. It was Lucky
Huh,
Louie and
no
his crew.
way. No way.
Yeah,
No
way.
way. Yeah, I mean they're looking out for the best interest of the people.
Yeah,
I mean not their own, of course.
with Mick and Susan and all them. They are not interested in the facts. They are interested in their narrative. They do not produce facts. So we have nothing. That's why I won't talk to Susan. That's why I won't talk to Mick. They've had their chance to come out. I provided specific links like with Joshua Schroeder, all of them. I've called them out on Twitter. People can go and search this on my Twitter feed. You will see where I have laid out links. I have identified specific points of contention, and they have not addressed any of those. They come out with rhetoric and state that I'm wrong, but they don't cite chapter and verse on how. They don't
Bec-
produce facts. There's no reason to debate them. They're not going to use facts. And I know that. They've been, you asked me why Mick would lie. Because he's built a franchise for 20 years. He's gone so caustic against so many people all this time that if they found out that he's Lucky Louie 100%, and it's going to happen, there's going to be a lot of people he's going to have to answer to that he's lied to. And now he's came out and doubled down because he didn't think I'd ever be able to produce the goods. If he admitted it then, and I already know what's going to play out with this, pretty sure. He said it wasn't him. He didn't think I could prove it, and now he's locked in. He can't admit it's him, and he's banking on it not being ever proven 100%. And if it does get proven 100%, he's going to come out and say, "Well, I had to lie and hide my identity because when Morgellons came out and the chemtrails, look how hostile they were. Now look how this UFO crowd, they're so
I was
hostile.
afraid
They're
for
they're
my
giving,
own
yeah. I
safety.
had to. I can't
Hmm.
admit it because they would attack me. Look how I'm being persecuted already just by the implication of being Lucky Louie. If I admitted it, what would happen to me? So the ends justify the means. I had to lie about it.
So with all of this Guerrilla Skeptics, them, keeping this, the general information that most people hit, where they're able to modify, they're able to do, secondhand sources, other things like that, where they're controlling the narrative. Do you feel like this is a this is a evolution, or this is an offshoot of, kind of what the government's done before, like example Project Mockingbird or other things of
Yes.
shaping online perception.
What Susan Go, the Pentagon PAO, that was a retired colonel and psyops that worked with Rumsfeld, that lied to the congressman that went overseas. She is a huge hand in orchestrating the ground game for psyops for the Pentagon. She stated that you cannot separate the duties of public affairs officer from that of psyops. They are one and the same. This is in her 2003 paper. And it's known that she's lied on emails about Elizondo with ATIP and such. So she's not an honest broker. And this paper that she wrote outlines civilian information control. She wanted to have a cabinet member for PSYOPs that was a cabinet advisor that had direct access to the president, and a also counterpart in the Pentagon that had direct access to the Pentagon chief to control all information that came in and out, to review it, to make sure it fit the narrative and interests of the government. Same thing that we're seeing in Wikipedia that Jimmy Wales wanted was a minority of informed editors that would be able to cut the bunk out and the charlatans and look after the best interests of Wikipedia. I found his blog for that where he argued into the existence. That's around 2006. I can provide you the links to that conversation too. So he sanctioned this group to have monopolies on the platform, which, it's against the rules. They use those rules to bludgeon others with. They even help write the rules and modify as it evolves, since 2005 and 6. They've been at this a very long time. And why Lucky Lee wouldn't want to come forward with his true identity, if it's indeed Mick West, that has been so caustic and incendiary on Wikipedia, thinking that they have complete anonymity for nearly 20 years now. I've put together multiple packages for multiple people that have biographies of living people. I've put together, some by request, some by my own curiosities, extensive information packages of comments made in Wikipedia by each editor about each specific person that are high value people in this conversation on UAPs, consciousness, and things like that. So we are compiling information. We continue to compile examples of that. So I've got at least a dozen high interest people like Lou Elizondo, David Grusch, Ross Coldhart, George Knapp. Bob Lazar, it's so contentious, I just don't really want to touch that, but he has been the most vehemently attacked by both Lucky Lee and Mick West of anybody. But and Jeremy Corbell, they've all been incendiarily referred to as con men, grifters, charlatans, all this stuff. The vernacular Lucky Lee uses is awful. Same thing with JPS, who's suspended now. So is RP 2006, which is Robert Palmer, because those guys cannot, and Roxy the dog, they've got mouths on them. They were arguing with other editors like over Havana Syndrome, and one of them made an anti-Semitic comment and got banned for at least a month. Another one was criticizing Mormonism and got banned. And another one's arguing about Havana Syndrome and got banned, and they've been banned multiple times. RP is not supposed to be touching biographies of living people since 2020, I think, that he got banned from that because he couldn't stop pushing. And I can get you links to this too, where he was editing in everywhere he could, Committee for Skeptical Inquiry articles and as reliable sources, doing what their paper said of reverse editing, shoving their dogma articles through CFI into every article that they could put it in, and completely cooking the books. And they would remove any information that went against their narratives, like with Hal Puthoff. Hal himself in 2017 was trying to put peer-reviewed white papers into his profile. All he wanted was to get the name pseudoscience removed from it, because this is this guy's life's work. He's done tremendous documented white paper acknowledged physics and science and contributions in many topics. So the guy should be appreciated for his life's work. But to see pseudoscience on the number one information on him it was
I've
it
seen
hurt
him
his
attacked
feelings.
in interviews as well. Yeah.
Yeah, he was trying to put the white papers in and get and prove that it wasn't pseudoscience because they were peer reviewed on the topics and stuff and well documented by others. And they took them out because they said that they only go with secondary sources. And since no one's writing on it that's a credible source, they're not going to use his white papers. And instead, to establish pseudoscience, they used one book that was written by a biologist that said that how put-offs work was pseudoscience. That is their reliable source, written by a non-physicist. That's how you discredit him. And he finally wrote in there, and this broke my heart. This is part of why I'm doing this. Is he wrote that, if any of his students or somebody comes in here to try and get a fair assessment of who I am and my work, this is not the place to do it. I give up. And he stopped trying to edit from there. It's there's no redress for living persons that they often will go and create a user page like Lil Zondo's and a few other psychics and things that were on there. They create them for the sole purpose of attacking their credibility. And they control those pages because they have majority and they have an authorized majority. So they've got senior admins that are cooking the books on multiple topics, and they're also involved in politics. They're in there and big money, big pharma. They are they're involved in different pharmaceutical companies, promoting some, putting down others. They're promoting some candidates and dialing down others. And the information they're putting into some of those candidates has already been proven false. And like COVID-19 conspiracy of lab leak and conspiracy of vaccines causing harm. There's been solid science come out now to prove that both of those are viable, that there is credible information that some of the vaccines can cause harm, and that Havana syndrome does have energetic etiology, and that the lab leak had that's a very high percentage. That's what happened now. But they won't allow those edited into Wikipedia. None of it. Doesn't matter, just like Havana syndrome, how overwhelming the evidence becomes. This is where they state they hang back and they don't go with every published article and the new fad. They wait and see how it shakes out over time. So on those instances, like on Havana syndrome and such, when there's new credible information, they hang back and say, well, we're going to let it mature first. Then we'll see about putting it in an article. But when it suits their purpose, they will take it the same day, like a CFI Skeptic Inquirer article, and shove it in there. Like Bartholomew, as soon as he writes a paper, they shove it into the Havana syndrome page.
They show each other favoritism.
They're not
and
honest brokers.
They're not honest brokers, and this is why I said what I said, and that is that if they're continued to be allowed to do these edits that they're going to do, that it will be, I would hope that Wikipedia would be dead in 5 years, and that I think that currently, right now, with what they're doing, it's garbage. It is garbage, and anybody that goes there and trying to find out reliable information, I would question any information I read on there, because especially in the topics that we're interested in and what we're discussing right now, it's not worth a person's 5 minutes to go. And so yeah, it's garbage in their control.
Susan came out on your interview with her and stated that people, just because they have a biography page on Wikipedia, that they don't own it, and then they can't come in and tell them what its content should be. Being very condescending and smug about that, and they claim that they don't own pages. Well, yeah, technically they do, and we can prove that because you have to have consensus on a page, majority rules, period. That's the bottom line. And when you have admins backing you up, but see, that's another thing Jimmy Wales argued in 2006, and that's what I found very disgusting too. If say you have 100 editors, supposed to be a democratic vote. If 100 editors vote that, like, say, to delete an article, a page, and one of these elevated, knowledge editors that's looking after the best interest of Wikipedia, they can override that vote. They can veto it. So it doesn't matter if it's their agenda. It has no bearing on majority. The senior editors will come in and they always use. They have a lot of dirty tactics, but they will run. They have the access to the tools to run to see if a person has multiple user accounts on Wikipedia. They will try and remove an editor that is oppositional to them any way they can, whether they can page ban them, Wikipedia ban them. They check them. That is a standard tool they use when they have a editor come in and challenging them. The first thing they do is run a check to see if they have if they can prove that they have a sock puppet account. I've seen them ban editors, since I started this, for accusing them of being a sock puppet account because it seems like they are, but they couldn't prove it, so they still banned them for it.
Mr. Heatherly, have any of these tactics or concerns that you've brought to light, have any of these things been brought up to the Wikipedia shareholders, either through your efforts or through some coordinated pushback to show that, hey, there's some shenanigans going on?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been multiple occasions that GSOW and skeptics, I don't want to give Susan credit because the majority of contentious pages and topics she and her group are not involved with. They're kind of on the low level topics, and letting the intellectuals handle the heavy work. So she's not involved directly that much with UFO topic unless they need an assist, and she'll jump right in.
That surprises me. Chris, do you have any questions? That I'm stunned. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take a while to absorb all that. But you just
I just wanted
Anyway.
to preface this with, since we're talking about militant skeptics and stuff, with something from the late Stanton Friedman, and it's that the 4 rules to skeptics, and healthy skepticism is always welcome, and I think
Yes.
that it's good to have, like you were saying earlier, but when it's militant, it's unhealthy, especially if we're finding out that a lot of what they're saying or materialism and all of that stuff isn't true. And the rules start as this: is rule number 1, don't bother me with the facts. My mind is already made up. Number 2, what the public doesn't know, I won't tell them. Number 3, if you can't attack the data, attack the people. It's easier, especially in those 2 lines you were referring to at the beginning of a page.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, do your research by proclamation. Investigation is too much trouble, and who's going to know the difference anyway?
Sea lining.
Yeah.
And bulverism, and these are both tactics that Lucky Louie McWest talked about in the past. Bulverism is where you come into an argument and you assume that your position is accurate, and then you go forward telling the other person why they are wrong, assuming that you just assume you are correct. And that's the biggest issue with people like this, is that they are unteachable. And I've encountered this in my 10 years that I've been after I was forced into medical retirement. I started, I was pursuing physics because that was a huge hobby of mine since middle school. I found out about 10 years ago that I noticed where there were high power, working in as an engineer. I had 2 years of auto mechanics. Also, I worked in the shop for 10 years, fabricating every component you can imagine of steel, aluminum, glass. I did everything in the shop. I fabricated, I ran saws, I programmed the 5-angle plasma cutters, the brake presses, all those. I could run everything. There wasn't anything I couldn't do. So, I know how to form metals. I know what hand tool tool marks look like on steel, which is very reflective on stone too. It's very obvious what is a hand cut that wasn't guided, like on the bases that Ben from Uncharted X has, and he's open sourced the data on that, where over 10,000 data points of quality control showed that the vase had a held tolerance less than the width of a human hair for the whole vase. It was machine turned. This was pre-dynastic, and there's over 30,000 examples of those. Obvious machine tooling and manufacturing. So when I noticed that 10 years ago, and the trilithon stones that average about 1,000 tons each, that are sitting on top of a course of 400-ton blocks, that the base of the trilithon are 40 feet above ground, and you cannot get a credit card in between them. There was no technology that the Romans had, and they documented exhaustively all their projects because they're proud of it. Why wouldn't they be? There's nothing they ever had that would be able to lift those blocks and put them in place, much less transport them over 500 miles. You have to have special roads, special machinery. There's none of that. There's no hardened ground to show where these megaliths were built. But they, most of them, like the Giza Plateau itself, the basalt have power tool marks that can only be done that are so uniform. They had to be fixed cutting edges, like a lathe. This is all computer guided, not hands on to cut these. And when I saw that, I fell into that rabbit hole 7 years ago. I got in with a huge team. I know most of the people in what they call alternative ancient history now. I've contributed to a lot of people's research,
Graham
and I've
Hancock
got
goes into that too.
exhaustively of my own. But about 4 years ago, I got called into the UAP topic because of my reputation. They knew I was good at finding data that a lot couldn't, putting things together. So I was invited to come in to the UFO community and see if I'd give it a look. And I kept up with it somewhat. And 2019 was when it really came home to me, when Eric Davis made a statement that the U.S. government was in possession of off-world craft not made by human hands. That's when it hit me like lightning that, okay, now we're finally starting to get tangible information in the public purview. So that's when I transferred into the UAP area with Thomas Besser at Disclosure Night, and I met Lou Elizondo through there. We interviewed him, I think, 4 or 5 times. And then I met other people through him, and I switched over with Shannon Scott, where we're doing the military witnesses, UAP. So I think we had Lou on there. His last interview he's done was with us. So
Wow.
he'll be back, but
Cool.
for now,
I did
he's
have
out.
I did have a question, but before I ask, it was something you mentioned earlier, which I absolutely agree with, and I think it's like the perfect camouflage for what's going on, because it's like you'll have like David Grusch or someone come out, and then they'll, people will go and ask the people they think should have the answers to these questions. Like you'll go ahead and ask, like Arrow, whoever, and they're like, yeah, there's no evidence. We don't have anything. But it's just like, again, to what you were saying, if you don't have the clearance or you don't have the need to know, or if they do a character assessment, and they deem you not someone they want to tell this information to, you're not going to know. So when we go asking the questions to them, they're like, yeah, there's no evidence. And that's also like fuel for like skeptics too. They're like,
Gary Reed was the head of he was the top of the intelligence. He was the top cop in the world when Lou came into the Pentagon in 2008, and he was asked to put a counterintelligence around the OSAP program. When he first came in, it was still, I think, a DIA project. He was advised not to tell Gary Reed because Gary Reed was compromised. He was already having affairs with 2 different people in the office, and so Lou worked ATIP up until 2017, and it was handed off to Jay Stratton. He signed it over. There's released documents that show this, that he gave his leadership role to Jay Stratton before it was transitioned into the UAP task force. But that when Lou operated that small program up until 2017, and Gary Reed, the top intelligence officer of the world, didn't know that Lou was working this up until his resignation letter in 2017, stating the program existed and that he was not allowed to brief Mattis on it, and felt it could be a potential security risk on, tantamount to 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, because we don't know what we're dealing with. And he wasn't allowed to brief Mattis, who should, as the Secretary of State. And, he had a need to know, and they refused. So when he wrote his resignation letter, that bruised Gary Reed's ego, and he demanded Lou come in and talk to him about it. And so he's been doing administrative terrorism and trying. He told Lou, "I'll make it look like you're crazy. I'll get your clearance pulled." And he did have him investigated twice for the 3 Pentagon videos that were released, to try and say it was unauthorized and illegal. So they're using every tactic they can to discredit them. If they had, David Grusch swore under testimony to the both IGs and to congressional committees. If he's lying, he gets fined and sent to jail, and he loses his security clearance. That's not happening.
You also have Ryan Graves and Fravor also testifying, and
yes,
not to mention in 2013, and I bring this up to everybody, the former captains Rob Salas and David Shinley telling us that they were forced to sign NDAs, that these UFOs are shutting down nukes and stuff. They are actually showing up. This is a thing that happened.
Tim Galladay was having to pull off of his computer when he was sent it during an operation out at sea with his fleet, that this was a flight concern hazard because it'd been harassing him for weeks, multiple drones, and they use words like that, like drones, because they each service and different subset have a different buzzword, because they don't want to call it for what it is because of the FOIA process. So they use substitute words that are innocuous in place of, so that you don't come right out and say UAP.
Like drones.
Yeah, yes, exactly. You got to listen to their exact words because they are take them verbatim. You can't read into it because they use weasel words. When that Arrow report came out, it stated that they had investigated scores of UAP sightings and found nothing. That was just sightings. They didn't say who sighted them. They didn't say how many. They didn't say anything about sensor data, recovered materials. They didn't say any of that was negated. They just said that
Possible deniability.
the sightings were negated. And then they also said that there's no evidence of space aliens. Well, David Grusch and them didn't say they came from space because we don't know. All indications looks like they're native here. And as fantastic as it sounds, it's more like when than from where. So yeah, they can lie, they could state for fact, and if they're not officially briefed on it, like the two Keystone cops last year, Bray and Moultrie,
Mhm.
they were fresh into this as appointees when they didn't know about the nuclear incursions and stuff. And Maelstrom, they're like, well, that I may have heard something about it. It was the government's reports that documented that. They had the evidence on it themselves. So she told them to go back and educate yourself because if they did not take an official briefing, like with Arrow, they can tell people to put out a memorandum. Do not brief me on these topics because I need plausible deniability. So they can come out and factually state, I have not seen any evidence to date that would indicate anything extraterrestrials or a reverse engineering program. That can be factually true because they were not officially briefed on them.
Then they can look at each other and go, "Well, I didn't hear about the Maelstrom base. Did you hear
Yes.
about that?" And then Congressman, I can't remember his name's like, "Well, I'm telling you now. So
And,
now that I'm telling you, you go out and
Mhm.
investigate it." Yeah, you never
and,
heard of
and
that?
H,
That's interesting.
and HI can be from anywhere. So they've only ruled out one of multiple possibilities of an explanation for a non-human entity of its origin or where they have observed it. They are minimizing it on purpose. They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. That there's nothing to see here. There's billions and trillions of money on the line, power. When you have entire intelligence subset groups, I'm not condemning the whole Air Force or the CIA or any of that as a whole. There are members within each that think that they are doing their duty of protecting national security interests, but some of them are just protecting their financial interests because when they get into it with aerospace, we've seen this too many times. They jump from their official duties and then they go into these aerospace and make huge sums of money, but have to keep their mouth shut. So they're playing to their wallet, not national security. And some of them have lost sight of that. And I swore an oath to the Constitution. I didn't go to war, and I can I don't consider myself a hero. I got out early because of training injuries, but I've lived the doctrine. All my family have been in the military in Vietnam, World War II, the Civil War, War of Independence. My family's been in all of it. It's just we're blue bloods. This is what we do. But um, the American people, our Constitution, our way of life, they have lost sight that the government is of the people. But there is a subset government that's operating in the background, like with the Air Force not being compliant, that they're completely belligerent against Congress and the laws. And that's what I got my computer shut down on. Is like with Roswell, they've lied twice now to sitting presidents. When Clinton inquired about Roswell and wanted to know the truth, they put out one report and it was a lie, of course. And then he asked them, well, what about the biological? So then they put out another spin on it to come out with. And then they tried to say that it was partially 1952 when they used child-sized dummies or something like that.
Yeah, which
That they
wasn't
just that
tested
they just
until
got the
afterwards.
year mixed up and transposed. It didn't actually happen in 47. It was 52. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
So there are still people that are retired that were senior brass that helped put that together that lied to sitting presidents and members of Congress. And their Oakleys and their retirement pensions are all in line. Some of these are going to go to jail. And when I said this last time, my computer got fried. I'm losing my vision. I'm going blind. Can I say that I was attacked with ransom? No, I don't know. But it's awful curious. This started a couple of years ago when I started helping on this cause and getting affiliated with people. That strange crap started happening on my computer anytime I started talking about this project, which I never have a problem with it otherwise. So, it does make one wonder.
What do you think is happening in the sense of with these NHI, these beings, like there seems to be this shift happening where all this information is coming out. They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. I
Yeah.
think it's impossible now.
It
You
is.
can't do it anymore. And you have people talking about near-death experiences, consciousness. You have abductees talking about the same things that near-death experiences are talking about. And that consciousness is this key aspect to all of this thing. So what have you discovered?
Consciousness and the quantum field seem to be one and the same. That, and a lot of even government declassified documents are say now where they have to be able to psychically engage with the craft. That some of them are, and because there's many types of craft, there's many type of others out there that we're finding, but there are some craft that seem to be kind of reflecting some sort of drone or life form, like in the movie Avatar, where they have to meld with the flying beasts and stuff, but the beast has to accept them. There's government documents that cite that the craft have to choose the people, and they have to be able to become one with it to be able to fly it. That wherever the consciousness is in the substrate of the quantum field, it's like a omni quantum entangled, like in essence an ether. So like Wheeler talked about the one electron universe, loosely defined. This could all be, we are all quantum entangled with each other, the butterfly effect. So when we sight a craft, like I've heard testimony of multiple people that have looked at a craft from like 50 miles out, and within less than a second it's right in their windshield because it knew they were looking at it. It can push different into people's psyches to see different artifacts, that each one could see something different because it wants them to see that. And because like slide 9 that from the TTSA files, executive interface, they can move time around, so they can manipulate. Like when Gary Nolan was talking about the 3 people in the car that saw a craft above, through the summer, it was like 40 feet across or something. They took pictures of it. When they got home and looked at it, it was like a little star that was actually about 5 or 6 feet across. So it pushed the perception into their minds that it was a huge craft, but physically it was not. It was a small one. So that's really interesting that they can do the executive human interface, but we are all connected to that quantum consciousness. And then you have like the Monroe Report and multiple different disciplines that are not related at all, that all seem to indicate that it has a sentience of its own. So even Ross, Gary Nolan has even conceded that it looks like life at its base has been designed, that it is not random, and that a lot of scientists now are acknowledging that there wasn't enough time on Earth to have evolution of the species that we have, that it had to begin somewhere else. So then they try and look for the most acceptable for them, which is I get it, I respect that, like transpermia, where microbes can come here. They can cope with that, but them landing here and rolling out entire flora and fauna, that's hard to accept. I get that, but there's no evidence of transitional species. There's adaptation of species, but there's actually no evidence of transitions from one species to another. There's no proof of evolution. Flora and fauna were killed off wholesale in a lot of these major catastrophes, and then entire new flora and fauna showed up turnkey afterwards. Boom, here they are. And they have shown, like at Madagascar and that Kármán line or whatever it's called between Australia and the Southeast Asia, where species take a pronounced change. These are adaptation of species, not new species. There's no transition of a walk to a fly that had nub wings and that couldn't work or whatever, or, offspring. Chicken and the egg. There was proved with water memory by Luc Montagnier, a Nobel Prize winner. He proved that you can, if you have the correct frequency. He was able to take I think 100 base pairs of the AIDS virus and distill it out of a vial. I think like 10 passes to where all the biologicals were moved, and they were able to record the electromagnetic signature of that DNA sequence. They were able to record that, and then they transferred it in binary code to another lab, and played it to a vial with nucleotides in it, and it reconstituted that 100 plus base pairs at 98% accuracy of recreating
Wow.
the physical DNA strand. So this is just a theory, but if you want to say what came first, the chicken or the egg, imagine 40,000 years ago, they speculated that there was a supernova event, which is pretty widely accepted because of all the the ice core data and seafloor and all that stuff,
Hmm.
where it showed that there was a huge outburst of radiation of cosmic rays that hit the Earth. This is just speculation. And then we had the Younger Dryas comet that came into our solar system the inner solar system about 26,000 years ago that did cause all the havoc with the Younger Dryas and such. But what it looks theoretically, because that's around the time that they say Homo sapiens and showed up, and dogs both, because they really haven't found any evidence that dogs came from wolves, believe it or not. And Homo sapiens, they don't, we've got some mixed blood with Denisovians and Neanderthals, but there's no clear path of how Homo
Yeah, the
sapiens
link.
came to be. But
Yep.
theoretically, if you're the side of the planet, if you have, say, emus or whatever, but you don't have chickens, and you push the right frequency and amplitude for the right amount of time, say like with a supernova type event, it could bathe that side of the planet with those signatures, and they've proven that it can alter the DNA sequencing
Hmm.
to where when it's supposed to unfold, then the changes will occur. It could technically program embryos and eggs and living embryos of people that give birth or any animal. It can alter their DNA where you have to have 5,000 base pairs to maintain a species, so it doesn't go extinct. So you can't have one mutation to create a new species with. You have to have multiple pairs. So you could bathe an entire group of animals to where and their eggs and everything, when they produce, the next offspring will be an entirely different species. It's possible to do that, and you have to have at least 5,000 base pairs for a viable species to flourish. So it couldn't happen as a one-off mutation. The probability of that is very low to create a new species. They would have to be made in mass at once. How do you have spontaneous mutations to do that? One mechanism would be through those frequencies that can alter the DNA.
I'm starting to wonder why we're even bothering talking about these skeptics. I mean, this is honestly not, and I'm being honest here.
They're
This is great. I
they're
love it. I
the
love it.
only relevance they have to this topic is that, and this is I point out to Lou and others, is that you guys are out there doing all this work trying to give legitimacy, remove the giggle factor, and allow, and because the Air Force and all them spent 75 years in a documented program of disinformation to try and convince people that UFOs don't exist, paranormal doesn't exist, all that. They even had their hand in the National Enquirer to help muddy the waters with this. So they're fighting an uphill battle of stigma against the legacy information alone. But what I pointed out to them last fall that really incensed them and still is, because we're still trying to get the full scope. I told them, I said, for all the efforts you guys do, when people go to Wikipedia, because the court of public opinion is fickle, most of them don't fact check. I'm not faulting them for it. We only have limited time. But when they go and do get their cliff notes from Wikipedia, they are getting disinformation intentionally, because these
Yes.
guerrilla skeptics, and I'm not saying they're guerrilla skeptics of Wikipedia under Susan Gerbic, because her group doesn't usually mess with the UFO topic. It's out of their hands. They handle the paranormal stuff. That's fine. That's innocuous. The person's doing the most damage is Lucky Louie and his group that are doing this in Wikipedia, but they're also under their real names out there writing these damning articles and books and YouTube interviews and mainstream media presentations. They're attacking ufology. They're attacking the topic of UFOs. They're also attacking alternative history, like with Graham Hancock and all them. No matter the proof, they still deny it because they've got various interests for various groups, but they are being disingenuous, controlling the narrative in the spirit of what the Pentagon and them are doing, with not wanting the people to know the truth, that we are not alone. We haven't been, and they have evidence of it, but they don't know. Well, according to David and them with their public testimony, they do have an idea of different species, different humans, humankinds, different kinds of craft, different kinds of manifestations. Some are interdimensional, some the wormholes, whatever. But there's multiple the others. David had mentioned that there was 5 different types of species that were not clearly human that have been that they have possession of. The government does not want to come out and say, yeah, we know they're here, but we can't do a damn thing about it. Well, if they could open the books and get more scientists and things on this, like they're wanting to do, like through the Saul Foundation, where you can open this up to not affect national security, get our brightest minds on it, and figure this the hell out. But they don't want to do that. And there are ways to protect national security interests and still get that done, because if we don't, Russia and China, they can literally put the gun to the heads of all their scientists and throw their entire inventory at this and to try and figure it out. Luckily, we have a lot bigger brain drain than they do, but our equivalency of the bigoted people in the government and private industries that are affiliated, that the head count in that is going to be outpaced by Russia and China. And that's that Cold War David Grusch was talking about for the technologies. If we don't get more resources in this, we're going to lose that battle. And
but from a grassroots effort, what can we do to combat the infighting and all of these egos that are self-serving and they just want to promote their own voice? How do we get everybody on the same page from a grassroots?
I tried to come in a few times, and people, like Gary Nolan has led by example with this. People are going to have differing opinions, and that's fine. They're allowed to. Skepticism is encouraged, but it has to be authentic for the right reasons of why you can't just throw out inconvenient facts. Like take Mick West, for instance. He's terrified of anything supernatural. He's grown up with these strange fears, which shows it's pathological. So like the Hopkinsville goblins and stuff, that one really terrified him. So he can't accept that any of this is true, because if it does, he grew up and he convinced himself that the ghosts don't exist, so they can't stroke his face at night like he writes about and all that stuff. And the goblins can't reach down and grab him by eye hooks into the doorway. So his way of coping, and being bashed, I'm sure, with a Christian, Catholic mother, God's going to get you. So his way of coping with his fear is to negate that any of that exists. So for a person like him that is that rigid-minded and polarized, and this is a common theme I found with these skeptics, the CFI, they are all very much rigid, black and white minded people that have a lot of pathology driving their fears into their dogma and their belief, because Mick West will not accept any information that is contrary to his belief structure, because if you acknowledge one it's a non-human intelligence, then that entire wall of it psychologically falls, and then he's open to all of his fears again. He can't acknowledge it no matter how many facts come at him. He's disingenuous because he's not open to change. He's not teachable. And that's where we have these skeptics and things. I've tried to come into the community on Twitter and followed by Gary Nolan's and others' example. Look, we're going to have strong opinions, and some of us strongly disagree, and that's okay. But when you're in this community, I'm not going to name them and give them any. I'm not going to conjure them, but they don't deserve the credit. When you have accounts on Twitter that all they're doing is trying to discredit others and tear down, they're not there to build anything. They are disingenuous. They're putting out false information, and they're throwing out whatever sticks because of the court of public opinion. They know that they can propagandize, and if they convince enough people that are on the fence and not educated on this topic that their opinion is correct, then they're controlling the narrative. But sincere people that want actual disclosure and answers in this community, if they can't agree, they need to separate, because beating each other up is not going to help. Getting into different groups that are able to cohabitate with each other online and focus on the research instead of the infighting. We've got to stay with the main body. We can't keep getting distracted on these side hustles and skirmishes, because they know it keeps us from fighting the main thrust of figuring this out and holding the government accountable. So they're interdicting with guerrilla warfare tactics to keep us distracted and not centralized for a reason. So if people can't agree with each other in the community, they need to agree to disagree. And if they have to block each other, then fine. Segregate into the groups that can work together and pursue knowledge, not pursue destroying some other group. That's bullshit. I didn't come into this community to fight with people. I came in to pursue the truth and help protect, not just the American people, but all humanity. If there's a threat, I want to know what it is, and I want to know there's something we can do about it. And the people that are hindering disclosure, calling Grusch a liar, and all them, that all they do is propagandize. They are not in this community for the right reasons. They need to be segregated out and blocked, not attacked in any way. Just block them and go on, because they're not a sincere part of the conversation. If they don't want to be civil, they don't want to be authentic, they are not part of the solution. And not to be hateful to them, they need to be segregated and blocked for their good and for the other people's good. It's not healthy to have this kind of hatred brewing up among the community, but these people are sowing it intentionally to divide and conquer. Wikipedia, it doesn't have to be, they keep saying undue weight. Fine. You don't have to give it any validity, but at least include it in the article and let people decide for themselves. But they won't even do that on a lot of it, especially if they know it's true. And like with David Grusch, they wrote in the talk page that since he was the person with the most senior rank and standing on his stellar military record, using that as credibility with Carl Nell and all them that was vouching for him, that he was Wilkie Lee was incensed that he was using his military record and medals and all that to provide a character reference for him. And he said that this person is the largest threat of pseudoscience and sensationalism, and Wikipedia, being a small voice, had to throw everything they could to counterbalance him on other platforms. So they took it upon themselves to determine everything he's saying was false and that he needed to be stopped at any cost, and that Wikipedia was justified to throw every negative resource they could muster against him. And
Well, heaven forbid.
I can show you the talk page where that took place, the exact conversation.
Please do, and we'll post that in the video. And heaven forbid that someone brings their credentials to the table when discussing such a topic. Isn't that what we should be expecting from the science community? They're big about that. Well, I've got these credentials, even if they're actually academic credentials and not Wikipedia
pilot testimony that were trained, millions of dollars of training. They can identify the silhouette of every known craft platform known to humanity, civilian and military. They can identify them from the horizon line. They have to make multiple decisions, and they're able to track in real time multiple bogeys and all that crap, distance, range, all that crap. Because being a Top Gun fighter pilot, I would dare say you're pretty good at judging distance and size of anything that you see in your environment. To say that pilot testimony is not credible and negate them like Lucky Louie and Mick West both do, that's extremely disingenuous, and they are bigoting anything that counters their narrative that no UAPs exist, there's no NHI, that there is life somewhere way out there, like maybe 120 light years, and it's microbes, but there's no chance of intelligent life here besides us. It's just the odds are too against it. It doesn't matter what the odds are. It doesn't matter what's most logical and most probable. Most of the sightings, 95%, can be prosaic, but it's the 5% that aren't, that we're interested in, and that have been proven over and over again with secondary evidence that is not human.
So so it's just so funny and it's ironic that they go, well, we have the secondary sources, right, for their side, right, which are all part of the Center for Inquiry, by the way, and then you have the other, which is the believers, the experiencers, the witnesses. Okay. That's not good secondary. That's not good secondary sources, and it's that picking and choosing. And it's just like going back to, well, how dare they try to use their military background when they're talking in front of Congress and all their credentials. But, Daniel, myself, Christian, anybody else that doesn't have the military credentials or the professional credentials, they would say, well, you don't have any credentials. So it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. If you believe in it, then it's hogwash to them. It's pseudoscience. It's woo. It's everything else.
And these are the guys that worked in the UAP programs. These are the guys that had the access, that were actually had the TSSCI clearance, that worked in UAP programs, that had, like David Grusch, that had access to over 2,000. the IG found his testimony credible and urgent, and the original ICIG is now his lawyer. If he were lying, the Pentagon, as hard pressed as they are to negate his testimony, if he had provided false testimony, he would be being brought up on charges by now, not further investigations into his allegations. I'm not going to call them claims because there's merit to them. And people keep saying, oh, 300 and something days and no evidence yet of Grusch's claims. David never stated that he was going to present facts to the public. What he said was that he encouraged and was begging basically for the ICIG and Congress to investigate his claims, to pursue it themselves. He provided, along with 40 others that were either in the retrieval program or legacy members of it, that have firsthand evidence of some sort. He's recently been cleared to state that he actually did see firsthand evidence of some kind. All these people worked in these programs or still do. Their opinion above all others is what matters. And he invited Congress and the ICIG and all of them to investigate him, to prove him wrong if he's lying. They say that, well, it was the same circular believers and stuff. No, yeah, he did. He went through 2,000 different programs. So yeah, he talked to a lot of people. And yes, he did have Eric Davis and them on staff and things at some point, I think, for UAP task force, but they weren't his sole, somebody as thorough as him. And he laid it out like Carl Nell and stuff. They are meticulous to cross-reference people to ensure what they're telling them is not just a single source provider information, to vet them, because these are senior intelligence officers. These are the elite of the elite. People like David Grusch, Carl Nell, these are some, genius level people, Eric Davis. But Eric is a worker bee that didn't get involved in the structures of the program, so he really doesn't know exactly how it all enrolls. But same thing with Kirkpatrick. He was mostly a hands-on DARPA guy developing lasers, had very little administrative hands-on experience until he got put in some programs. But that doesn't make you an expert on the subject matter. It just means that you direct the people to do.
It's also heavily compartmentalized, so it's just, which is how you protect the information. So that doesn't help.
When we take one of the most quoted and famous current living skeptics, and that's Mr. West, okay, who is otherwise best known as developing a skating video game, okay, and also he's been scared of anything relating to the phenomena his entire life. I don't really think that either of those really equates somebody to be impartial when it comes to these subjects. And so, I mean, as far as like credibility goes, I mean, I would hope that people, when realizing that, would, using their own judgment, would be like, okay, well, maybe, this David Grusch guy has a little bit more behind him. Okay, or the pilots that see this stuff all the time, and that includes commercial airline pilots.
Yeah.
Okay, and other military people that have served our country proudly and greatly.
He did not behind a desk.
He did not leave his station willingly. When he filed the DoD IG report, it was supposed to be confidential informant, and which means even no one outside the investigation was supposed to know. When it got leaked, and an aerospace corporation and things got wind of it, and the people that reported it, then the death threats ensued and all that jazz. So and then the administrative terrorism. So he filed about a year later a report with the ICIG to try and get remedy. And when nothing was moved on that for another year, then he decided to go public, because he was not, his allegations and the other 40 were not being pursued. And he was getting administrative terrorism on his job, and it was affecting his direct employment, to where they were bigoting against him because of this in retaliation. So he was forced from his job, and he had to fight this from the outside because he had no choice. He was 34 years old, and he was on a stellar career path like Carl Nell that was just unheard of how proficient he was at his job. People are trying to claim that he's got that he's autistic and stuff and taking advantage. No, autistic doesn't equate automatically to low IQ. This guy is savant syndrome autistic. Yeah, he may have a little awkward social cues, but the guy has a brilliant mind, an eidetic mind, and he can track large volumes of information at once. So he's no one's fool. He was not gullible and swayed by interesting stories. He was a quintessential skeptic. He fact-checked everything and he had the full resources at one point to call people into skiffs and order them to testify and provide information as members of the military and such. They were obligated by their jobs, duty bound, to give testimony, even if they wanted to or not.
Nor is he crazy because he has PTSD, which is the lowest blow, one of the lowest blows that I've seen in my 52 years life of following this stuff. Okay. And I love how that failed, by the way, like trying to get with the program jerks, jackasses. They don't fall for that stuff anymore because there's plenty of people, not even military, that suffer with PTSD. And that doesn't mean that they're making up these stories. And he's not doing it for money and fame.
No.
Okay,
you don't see him running the circuit, do you? You don't see him writing a book. He had to say what he had to say. He's standing on what he had said, but there's no reason to go through on podcasts or news shows or mainstream and keep rehashing the same facts. He's not in it about the money and the fame. He said what he did to get the truth out and to force the government to investigate his claims and come clean. That was his mission, and he's standing by that, by his example. So he's not out there grifting like some people claim. He's lost an extreme amount of money because of his stellar career path. He was making a lot of money in the NGA and what he was doing. It was very disingenuous what happened to him because this was going to be his career. He's going to retire. It's bullshit to try and say that he saw Lou Elizondo out there on unidentified and the big bucks he was making and wanted to be like him. Bullshit. Lou is nearly bankrupt because of having to leave the government. So is David. The majority of military and government that were in the military or the CIA intelligence, and like Rumsfeld, like Mattis, they've been in combat. I dare say the majority of those people have some level of PTSD, of trauma. It's inherent in the job. When you're an intelligence agent, like counterintelligence, you're working in foreign nations and risk of getting killed all the time. That's a lot of stress, I dare say. So it's not, David Grusch is not isolated having PTSD. The majority of intelligence and military veterans have PTSD, and they are fully functioning members of our government. Not only was he cleared by that, and it wasn't just the good old boy system giving him a pass. He was promoted and even went into different programs after that were not his peers throwing him a bone to let him stay in the same job. He was promoted to other jobs. He got promoted up to deliver the daily briefing to the president. So if he had any kind of psychological issues whatsoever, that would never happen. This guy's 6'5", for God's sake. David's a monster. You don't want a loose cannon giving the president his daily briefing when he's 6'5" and 260 or whatever. And can twist his head off like a cap bottle. Disclosure efforts. There are a lot of people that are experiencers that complain that, well, the nuts and bolts getting all the attention, but why not us experiences? Well, because like with Saul McGarry and a lot of people have acknowledged, and I've been pushing this for years now, you have to start with something that people can relate to and what's believable to get your foot in the door with them. And that's why legitimacy matters. That's why Wikipedia matters, because when people, even scientists and academics and politicians, go to Wiki for a quick briefing, they're getting the wrong impression. And that is not helping this cause. It is a huge undermine of our efforts, and the government knows it. Lucky Louie and his crowd know that. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's completely disingenuous, and it's not helping national security. They are harming it by putting out disinformation. They don't care.
I would preface almost all experiencers or contactees have gotten the message of some form of utilization, like of unity, a sense of unity, of reminding everyone of like, hey, we're all one, we're all connected, right?
Yes.
And of potentially something really bad coming down the pike. I know with my own contact experience, I've gotten that message of like, take care of the planet. And so I think that is there's something, whether it's one thing, whether it's a multitude of things, I'm sure that NHI have their technology, or they're able to perceive with consciousness. They probably have a good idea of what potential outcomes, as time and space moves along, and since all happening all at once. But I there's definitely something kind coming for sure. And like
Yeah.
you said, we like everyone can feel it. That is definitely the feeling. It's like it's like when you get
Zeitgeist.
the, it's like when you get the smell of like
Yeah.
a really big storm coming,
Yeah.
and you that kind of dread in your stomach. It's that feeling.
And keeping us divided and conquered and bickering among ourselves. We're not going to come together and force our governments to be one world. And I'm not advocating a one world government. There are different cultures that are different from each other and different demographics, and that's fine. That they congregate according to their belief structures, as long as they're not trying to conquer others because of their beliefs. That's fine. They can believe as they want. That's okay. We have free will. But don't try, and people do not have the right to rule others without their consent. You've got governments bigoting information, and you've got these private interest groups also bigoting information. They are looking after their interest, not the good of the whole. And fundamentally, when you guys asked what separates people to understand their motives, and I think all of you would understand, George especially, with his background in psychology, you got to look at what motivates a person. And when they are motivated by hate and revenge, nothing good is going to come of that.